Sometimes they'll say to us, Challenge Day was great and it felt awesome around here for a week, and then everybody went back to saying rumors about each other, right? So a couple of things. One, we situate Challenge Day as a catalytic event, right, that has kind of cascading effects over time. We plant seeds, right, and we provide the school with some additional follow-up tools to continue watering those seeds in our absence. So what we encourage them to do is to develop a Be the Change team, for which we provide over 40 social and emotional learning activities that they can implement within that team and throughout the student body. We also encourage them to really allow the students to direct the changes that they want to see on their campus. So towards the end of the day, probably our favorite activity is called Speak Out. We turn the microphones over to the kids. What have you guys learned today? What do you want to change at your school? What do you see happening around here that you think should be different? And some of the things they say blow us away. Blow us away. Something that I also wanted to point out about Cross the Line is that in a lot of the studies around adolescent neurology, what we're understanding is that, one, the brain is plastic, right? Two, adolescence is a time when the brain is deeply under reconstruction, right? So it's a time when we can actually get in there and help to build some inroads. Like compassion and empathy are, what's the word I want to use? Are characteristics that we can teach and that have to be practiced. It's like a muscle that we have to exercise, right? So in terms of certain neural pathways being pruned away, if we're not practicing empathy, they get pruned away, right? So what we're doing in this activity is, one, saying, this is possible. It's possible for you to be connected with the people in your school in this way. It's possible for us to see one another past our image and past assumptions and judgments. It's also possible for us to actually feel compelled to treat each other well because we understand what other people are going through, but that has to be a regular practice. So to speak to your question, one of the other things we encourage schools to do is to create spaces for the young people where they can talk to each other about what's really going on in their lives, right? So we'll say, okay, if you have an advisory class, give them an accountability buddy. Have them sit with that person and say, I got 2 minutes. I'm going to drop that water line. What's going on in your life? So they get into the practice of naming what's happening for them, of expressing it, and they get into the practice of learning to listen. Right? So much of our conversations these days are comprised of one person talking and the other person thinking about what they want to say. So, so we're trying to turn that on its head and, put the phones away and let's really dial in and listen to each other.
Also, just want to add on that too. So, how many people here had something that you maybe spent, something you need to work on within yourself that didn't happen overnight, right? That's all happened with us, right? Things that we're constantly working on. So the way that I look at these programs is, for some people, they actually do get it in that one day and their lives are forever changed. They email us and they operate through life differently. For other people, it's an ongoing thing, but planting that seed's really important, especially as the brain's developing, especially as they're looking around to see what's, what's normal in that type of environment. A lot of times they don't feel comfortable exploring parts of themselves because the environment isn't safe to do so. So one of the things we do is we create a safe environment. For a lot of them, it's the first time that they've ever had a safe environment. We actually even tell the adults while the students are talking, this isn't your time to give advice, because the young people get that their entire lives. This is their time to just express themselves, be heard and respected. And then once that's possible, you see lots of different things coming out. And during Speak Out, like you were saying, one of my favorite parts of the day, we see students like the bully apologize to the victim. We don't like using those words, but just for the sake of understanding it, we see apologies, things that I know adults who've gone their whole lives without apologizing to the person they need to apologize to. And to see these young people not only apologizing, but doing it in front of 100 people on the microphone, it is one of the most powerful things. So it looks different, but it affects everybody in different kind of ways and different lengths of time. So.
One of the things we hear the most when they get up and take the microphone to share, it's like, I had no idea. I had no idea everybody else was going through the same thing I'm going through. Here I was struggling with terminal uniqueness. I'm the only one. I'm the only one. And come to find out, everyone around me either has some version of this or, we say to them sometimes, or I like to say, emotions are kind of like the periodic table. There's only so many chemicals that we know of right now, right? Emotions are the same way. There's only so many and we all experience them. For different reasons, but we all experience them. So you know what it feels like to be happy, you know what it feels like to be sad or to be anxious or afraid, right? So if we can remember that we're actually all walking around having that experience, we're less likely to harm one another, right? The struggles that we see the young kids go through in the schools and a lot of the issues that we're grappling with around school safety has to do with the fact that we don't have reliable information about each other, right? So we assume and we project and then we mistreat one another. So we create small groups where people can share, and that's one of the key reasons why we have them talking. If you get to know each other better, the likelihood of being harmful goes down. Right. Even if you didn't have major trauma as a child, harm is unavoidable, right? Stress was unavoidable, and there's actually an impact on how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to other people, and what it looks like for us to be in the world.
In my ideal vision, there's the same way we have physical education in schools. I'd love to see social and emotional learning as part of the curriculum throughout, all schools all around the country. I am going to speak real quick on the mindfulness piece real quick because it's connected to this. So there are schools now in the Bay Area that are starting to teach mindfulness. And I went to, there's this thing called the Maharishi University of Management in Iowa. It's the one that, if you saw recently, Jim Carrey did a speech at. And it's a real, and actually Oprah went to the town and did a special on it. It was considered one of the most unique towns in America. So they actually teach the young people since kindergarten about mindfulness and about certain things that we're talking about. And what they've learned is in their school, in their classes, they have a 10-minute period to just sit and close their eyes and just kind of do some reflecting on where their emotions are at, everything since kindergarten all the way through high school. In that town, they have 0 crime, 0 bullying in the schools. All the children are excelling, they win championships. So it's just kind of more evidence that once students' social and emotional needs are met, their academia goes up as well. But if we're just treating students like they're, on an assembly line, go here and memorize this fact, repeat it, pass the test, but they're not learning who they are, it affects them as adults as well, their levels of happiness and things like that, especially when we're putting a lot of emphasis on success and what that looks like, or what happiness and looks like, being connected with yourself. It's how we feel about the work that we do, it's how connected we are to our emotions, and to me that's an overall successful person, is that, of course, intelligence, right, mental intelligence, of course, but also valuing emotional intelligence, because no matter how intelligent we are mentally, no matter how much success we achieve, if we're not connected to who we are inside ourselves, then none of that really matters as much. So we're trying to treat these students not like an assembly line, but as a whole being. So.
And what we've discovered is that regardless of where we are, the capacity to feel comfortable in one's skin, to feel safe enough to express oneself fully, are things that the young people today just don't feel. So when we're going into those schools, they leave and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so free, or I feel relieved, I feel like I can just be myself and say what's real for me. So it's a really beautiful process. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and for sharing with the people around you and asking awesome questions.
Thank you guys. Thank you.